The snow fell differently that day, heavier somehow as if the sky itself knew what was coming. December 15th, 2003, Traverse City, Michigan. A Tuesday afternoon that would fracture time itself into before and after. She walked across the parking lot of Munson Medical Center at 3:47 p.m., her burgundy scrubs visible beneath an unzipped winter coat. Security footage would later show her fumbling with car keys, breath crystallizing in the 20-degree air, completely unaware that within 47 minutes she would simply cease to exist. The crunch of her boots on fresh powder echoed between rows of salt-stained vehicles. Somewhere across town, church bells marked the quarter hour. St. Francis, where she'd been baptized 31 years earlier. The sound carried on wind that cut through wool and flesh alike, the kind of cold that made bones ache and engines reluctant to turn over. She reached her car, a green 1998 Honda Civic with a cracked bumper and a dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror. The engine sputtered, coughed, then died. She tried again. Nothing. On the third attempt, it roared to life, and she sat for a moment, letting the heater fight against the frost creeping across her windshield. Through the foggy glass, she might have noticed the figure standing 3 rows back, motionless between 2 pickup trucks. Or perhaps she didn't. The last image captured shows her taillights disappearing into swirling snow at 3:52 p.m. After that, Rebecca Holbrook became a ghost story. 20 years would pass before anyone understood what happened in those final moments. 2 decades of a mother setting out teacups for a daughter who would never come home. 7,300 days of a community checking over its shoulder, wondering if whoever took Rebecca might come for them next. But first, there was the discovery. A jogger named Marcus Webb, taking his usual route through Hickory Hills despite the weather, noticed something wrong with the landscape. Rebecca's car sat abandoned at the trailhead, driver's door ajar, engine still running. Her purse lay overturned in the snow, contents scattered like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. Lipstick, hospital ID badge, a grocery list written on the back of a prescription pad, milk, coffee, birthday candles. The trail of footprints led 30 yards into the woods before they simply stopped, as if she'd been plucked from the earth itself, leaving nothing behind but questions that would echo through decades. Rebecca Holbrook woke at 5:15 a.m. every morning, even on her days off, a habit carved deep by 12 years of nursing shifts. That final Monday morning followed her usual ritual, French roast coffee in the yellow mug her niece had painted 2 sugars, splash of cream. She'd stand at her kitchen window watching dawn break over Grand Traverse Bay, planning her week in the margins of consciousness. The coffee maker still held half a pot when police processed her apartment. Cold, waiting. Those who knew her best would later struggle to explain Rebecca to strangers. How do you capture a life in past tense? She was the nurse who sang to dying patients, who kept peppermints in her scrubs for anxious children. Her colleague Janet Morrison remembered finding her once, after a particularly brutal shift, crying in the supply closet over a teenager who hadn't made it. She felt everything, Janet would tell investigators. Maybe too much. The last photo of Rebecca, taken at her nephew's birthday party 2 days before, shows her mid-laugh cake frosting on her finger. She'd left a voicemail for her mother that Sunday night, her voice bright with plans. Hey Mom, just confirming lunch Thursday. I'll bring dessert. Love you. Martha Holbrook would play that message every night for 20 years, Rebecca's voice a ghost in the machine, forever promising a Thursday that never came. Traverse City in 2003 was the kind of place where neighbors still borrowed cups of sugar, where the biggest scandal involved the mayor's questionable casino development deal. Population 8,247, tucked between lake and forest, pretty enough for postcards but too small for secrets. Everyone knew Rebecca. She'd delivered half their babies, held their hands through chemotherapy, kept their final moments gentle, which made her disappearance feel personal, like the town itself had failed her. She'd been dating Tom Caldwell for 3 months, nothing serious. She'd insisted to friends, though she'd started leaving a toothbrush at his place. Her apartment still smelled like the lavender candles she burned obsessively. Her library book, a dog-eared copy of The Lovely Bones, lay spine up on her nightstand, marking page 237. She'd underlined a passage about how the dead watch the living. The irony would not be lost on those who found it. The mundane artifacts of an interrupted life would torment investigators. A load of laundry in the dryer, a half-written Christmas card to her sister, a dentist appointment scheduled for the following Tuesday. As if she'd simply stepped out of her life for a moment, fully intending to return. But sometimes a moment is all it takes for everything to change. Time would become the enemy in the Rebecca Holbrook case, not enough of it, too much of it, and 47 minutes that seemed to swallow a human being whole. 3:47 p.m. Rebecca exits Munson Medical Center. Security guard Dale Hoffman waves from his booth, their usual routine. She raises a gloved hand in response. Temperature 19 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind from the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Snow falling at a rate of 1 inch per hour. 3:52 p.m. Hospital parking lot cameras capture her Honda Civic turning left onto 8th Street. Windshield wipers beating steady rhythm. She stops at the red light at Union Street for exactly 43 seconds. A blue pickup truck idles 2 cars behind her. License plate obscured by snow and road salt. 4:05 p.m. ATM camera at Fifth Third Bank records Rebecca withdrawing $60. She counts the bills twice before tucking them into her wallet. Behind her in line, an elderly woman with a walker, a teenager in a Traverse City High School Letterman jacket, and a man in a dark coat who keeps his face turned away from the camera. Transaction time, 97 seconds. 4:12 p.m. Security footage from Gary's Market shows her Civic passing without stopping. Owner Gary Hutchins would later remember seeing her car because she usually stopped for gas on Tuesdays. Creature of habit, he'd tell police. You could set your watch by Rebecca. 4:19 p.m. Cell tower data places her phone traveling north on Silver Lake Road. The last text message sent from her phone, running late sorry, reaches her friend Sarah Chen at 4:21 p.m. Sarah was expecting her for coffee at 4:30. She would wait until 5:15 before calling Rebecca's apartment. 4:26 p.m. A motorist named Ellen Price passes a green Civic pulled to the shoulder near mile marker 14. She notices because the hazard lights aren't on, and she considers stopping. The snow is falling harder now. She decides against it, her own children waiting at home. This decision will haunt her for 20 years. 4:34 p.m. Final cell phone ping registers at Tower 0847B, covering a 3-mile radius that includes Hickory Hills Trail, Silver Lake and dense forest. After this, Rebecca Holbrook's digital footprint vanishes as completely as her physical one. The precision is what unsettles. 47 minutes to erase a person from existence. In a connected world of cameras and witnesses and digital breadcrumbs, someone had threaded a needle of invisibility. They knew her routes, her habits, her Tuesday routine. They understood the blind spots in Traverse City's surveillance net, the stretches of road where snow and forest swallow sound. What happened between that final phone ping and Marcus Webb's discovery would remain locked in silence for 2 decades. 47 minutes that would stretch into forever. The call came in at 5:47 p.m. Marcus Webb's voice shaking as he spoke to dispatch. There's an abandoned car, engine running, women's belongings in the snow. I think something's wrong here. Officer Patricia Dunn arrived first 7 minutes later, 23 years on the force, and she'd later described the scene as wrong in a way that made my teeth hurt. The Honda's headlights cut through gathering darkness, illuminating snow that fell like static on a broken television. Rebecca's purse contents formed a constellation in the white wallet, keys, hairbrush, the grocery list that would become evidence tag #001. Dunn called for backup before approaching the tree line. Training said wait, but instinct said move. She followed the footprints, women's size 7 boots, later confirmed as Rebecca's, into the woods. 30 yards in, they stopped. Not gradually, not struggling, just stopped. as if Rebecca had simply evaporated mid-stride. By 6:15 p.m., Hickory Hills crawled with uniforms and flashlights, beams crisscrossing like searchlights seeking bombers. The snow fell harder, each flake erasing crucial evidence. Detective Ray Morrison, leading the scene, made the first critical error, allowing too many officers to trample potential evidence before proper documentation. "We thought we were looking for an injured woman," he'd explain years later, "not a crime scene." Rebecca's mother, Martha, arrived at 7:23 p.m., still in her house slippers. Officer Dunn would never forget the sound she made when she saw her daughter's abandoned car. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob, but something primal that spoke of every mother's worst nightmare materializing in real time. The first search teams deployed at 7:45 p.m., 42 volunteers from fire and rescue, stumbling through woods in the dark, calling Rebecca's name until their voices went hoarse. Snow had already covered any tracks beyond the initial trail. Someone suggested checking the lake. Winter hadn't frozen it solid yet. The thought sent divers into black water that yielded nothing but old fishing line and beer cans. Channel 7 arrived at 8:30 p.m., their lights turning the scene into a macabre theater. The reporter's breath clouded as she spoke of mysterious circumstances and growing concern. Behind her, searchers moved like ghosts through the trees, their flashlights writing desperate arcs in the darkness. By midnight, when Detective Morrison finally called off the active search until dawn, 3 inches of fresh snow had fallen. Whatever secrets the scene held were now buried, preserved in ice like insects in amber. The golden hours, those crucial first moments when evidence is fresh and trails are warm, had slipped away like water through cupped hands. Morrison sat in his car afterward, heater running, staring at the woods. Somewhere out there, Rebecca Holbrook was waiting to be found. He just didn't know it would take 20 winters before she could finally come home. Traverse City woke different on December 16th, as if the very air had thickened overnight with unspoken fears. Parents who'd let their children walk to school suddenly formed carpools. Hardware stores sold out of deadbolts by noon. Jenny Patterson, who'd run her flower shop on Front Street for 15 years, installed security cameras for the first time, grainy eyes that watched nothing more sinister than snow falling on empty sidewalks. The familiar had become foreign, trust replaced by sideways glances. At Munson Medical Center, Rebecca's empty locker stood like a wound. Her colleagues jumped at shadows, traveled in pairs to the parking lot. Nurse manager Dorothy Klein instituted a buddy system for night shifts. "We kept expecting her to walk through those doors," she'd later say, apologizing for worrying everyone, with some perfectly reasonable explanation. But the doors stayed closed, and the explanations never came. Rumors sprouted like weeds in fertile soil. The morning crowd at Brew Bay Coffee traded theories with their lattes. Rebecca had been having an affair with a married doctor. She'd witnessed something at the hospital, maybe a mercy killing, maybe drug theft. She owed money to the wrong people. Each theory, more elaborate than the last, each speaker claiming inside knowledge from someone who knew someone who'd heard something. Tom Caldwell, Rebecca's boyfriend, found himself under the microscope of small-town suspicion. Neighbors reported seeing him drive by her apartment 3 times the day she vanished. He'd called in sick to work, a detail that seemed damning until investigators confirmed he'd been vomiting from food poisoning, his roommate vouching for his miserable presence on their bathroom floor during the critical window. The local psychic, Madame Zelda, real name Dorothy Pritchard, held court at her strip mall storefront, claiming Rebecca's spirit had visited her. "She's near water," she intoned to desperate family members, surrounded by 3 tall trees. Half of Traverse City bordered water, the other half contained trees. Still, search parties dutifully checked every matching location, finding nothing but their own reflected desperation. Principal Michael Harrison sent a letter home with every student. "While we have no reason to believe there is ongoing danger," but the subtext screamed from between carefully worded lines. "Lock your doors, watch your children, trust no one, The Christmas pageant scheduled for that weekend was postponed indefinitely. How could anyone sing Silent Night when the silence itself had become menacing? At St. Francis Church, Father O'Brien noticed his congregation swelling, nothing like fear to fill pews. He offered prayers for Rebecca, for her family, for answers, but mostly, people prayed for themselves, for their own families, for the town to wake from this nightmare that had settled over them like lake-effect snow. Traverse City held its breath, waiting, but sometimes the waiting is worse than the knowing. Detective Sarah Chen didn't choose the Rebecca Holbrook case, it chose her. Assigned as secondary investigator 3 days after the disappearance, Chen brought fresh eyes to chaos. Where others saw random evidence, she saw patterns. Where others heard conflicting witness statements, she heard a symphony missing crucial notes. By January 2004, when Leeds had cooled as thoroughly as Michigan winter, Chen was just warming up. Her garage became a second incident room. Corkboards covered every wall, connected by red string that mapped Rebecca's final day in obsessive detail. Hospital schedules, weather reports, traffic patterns, cell tower coverage maps. Her husband David learned to navigate around evidence boxes to reach the lawnmower. It's like living with a ghost, he'd tell her during one of their increasingly frequent arguments. Rebecca's ghost. Chen developed rituals. Every morning at 5:15 a.m., Rebecca's wake-up time, she'd review the case files over coffee, black no sugar, drinking it like penance. She'd memorized every witness statement, could recite the evidence log by heart. File hash 2003-1247 became her Bible, its margins filled with handwritten questions that multiplied like cancer cells. The ATM footage consumed her. She'd identified everyone in frame except the man in the dark coat. His face always turned away, shoulders hunched against more than cold. Frame by frame, she studied his gait, the way he held his hands, the brand of his boots barely visible in one shot. She had the footage enhanced, re-enhanced, digitally dissected. Technology failed where intuition screamed, this man mattered. Sleep became negotiable. Chen would bolt awake at 3 a.m. with new theories, stumbling to her garage to add another connection, another possibility. Why take Rebecca but leave her car running? Why stop the footprints so cleanly? What kind of person could make someone vanish in broad daylight, in a town where everyone knew everyone? Her captain Patrick Sullivan watched his best detective disappearing into the case like Rebecca had disappeared into the woods. Take a vacation, he ordered after finding her asleep at her desk for the 3rd time. This case will be here when you get back. But Chen knew better. Cold cases got colder, witnesses forgot, evidence degraded. Every day that passed was another layer of sediment burying the truth. She interviewed Tom Caldwell 17 times. Recanvassed Rebecca's route 33 times, submitted DNA evidence for testing whenever new technology emerged. Each negative result felt personal, like the universe was deliberately withholding answers. Her solve rate on other cases plummeted. Chen's got tunnel vision, colleagues whispered. They weren't wrong. The worst nights were when she'd stare at Rebecca's photo, the one from her hospital ID, smiling like she knew wonderful secrets, and apologize for not being smarter, for not working harder, for letting her stay lost. The photo stared back, patient and accusatory, a reminder that somewhere, someone knew exactly what happened in those 47 minutes, someone who'd been watching all along. 5 years in, the Rebecca Holbrook case had accumulated more false leads than a maze has dead ends. The first major break came in 2005. Anthony Vega, arrested for assault in Detroit, claimed he knew what happened to Rebecca. Detectives drove 4 hours through a March blizzard to interview him. Vega spun a tale of drug debts and midnight burial grounds, providing details that made Chen's pulse race. He knew about the dream catcher in her car, about the grocery list. For 48 hours, it seemed like the puzzle might finally complete itself. Then Vega's story crumbled. His inside knowledge came from newspaper archives and crime forums. The burial site he described yielded nothing but deer bones and disappointment. He'd wanted a plea deal, thought a famous cold case might buy leniency. Chen drove back to Traverse City in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel. 2007 brought Marcus Fielding, the drifter with haunted eyes, and a suspicious timeline. Witnesses placed him near Traverse City that December, camping illegally in the state forest. His previous arrests for assault made him promising. Chen spent 3 months tracking his movements, reconstructing his whereabouts for December 15, 2003. Gas receipts, shelter logs, security footage from a dozen businesses. The trail led to a homeless shelter in Saginaw, where Fielding had checked in at 2 p.m. on the day Rebecca vanished, a 3-hour drive from Traverse City. Surveillance footage confirmed his presence through dinner service, another ghost dissolving under scrutiny. The psychics multiplied like mushrooms after rain. Beyond Madame Zelda, they came from across the country, each claiming special connection to Rebecca's spirit. She was in a cave, she was in the lake, she was buried under a new construction site, she was trying to communicate through dreams. Martha Holbrook, desperate for any connection to her daughter, met with 7 different psychics before Chen gently intervened. Then came the ex-boyfriend investigation of 2009. Rebecca had dated Michael Torrance for 2 years before their breakup in 2001. Ugly breakup, friends said. Lots of shouting. Torrance had moved to California but returned to Michigan in November 2003 for his father's funeral. 1 week before Rebecca vanished, Chen flew to San Diego, where Torrance worked as a restaurant manager. His alibi seemed solid, working a double shift on December 15. But something felt off. She dug deeper, discovering he'd called in sick that day. Her pulse quickened. Another lie, another lead, until she found the emergency room records. Severe food poisoning, admitted at 10 a.m., discharged at 8 p.m. Witnesses confirmed he could barely stand, let alone drive to Michigan and back. Each false lead carved away another piece of hope. The case file grew to 17 boxes, each containing dreams that became disappointments. Tips still trickled in. A woman in Florida who looked like Rebecca, a confession from a dying man that led nowhere, a supposed witness who'd been too scared to come forward, but whose story changed with each telling. By 2013, 10 years after Rebecca vanished, Chen could recite every dead end like a rosary of failure. The caseboard in her garage had become a monument to futility, red strings connecting nothing to nowhere, but she couldn't stop looking, couldn't stop believing that somewhere in the maze of false leads, the truth waited. It had to, because the alternative, that Rebecca Holbrook had simply vanished without explanation, without justice, without closure, was unbearable, even for a detective who'd learned to bear the unbearable every day.
December 15th, 2023. The 20th anniversary arrived like an unwelcome relative, bringing with it the weight of accumulated grief. Martha Holbrook, now 73, still set Rebecca's place at the dinner table. The chair remained empty but for the ghost of possibility that maybe somehow this would be the day the door would open. Her hands, spotted with age and trembling with Parkinson's, arranged the silverware just so. Rebecca's favorite mug, chipped now, handle glued twice, waited beside a plate that would never hold food. The bedroom remained a shrine frozen in 2003. Scrubs still hung in the closet, the library book still marked page 237. Dust motes danced in afternoon light, the only movement in a space that had become more museum than room. Martha's friends had long stopped suggesting she pack things away. Grief, they'd learned, has its own architecture. Rebecca's sister Lisa chose a different path, becoming a detective in Grand Rapids. I couldn't save her, she told recruits during training seminars, but maybe I can save someone else. She worked missing persons exclusively, each case a proxy for the one she couldn't solve. Her closure rate was exceptional, her nightmares were worse. Tom Caldwell married in 2008, divorced in 2012. His wife cited his inability to let go of the past.
He still visited Rebecca's grave marker, empty earth beneath granite, every December 15th. He'd stand in the snow, wondering if somewhere she was warm, or if wondering was just another form of denial. The annual vigil had dwindled from hundreds to dozens. Die-hard supporters huddled against the cold outside St. Francis, lead candles replacing real flames after the fire marshal's mandate. Father O'Brien, white-haired now, led the same prayers. Hope had calcified into ritual, but ritual was better than nothing. Traverse City itself had moved on in ways both subtle and profound. The Hickory Hills Trail was renamed. Too many people associated it with Rebecca, with fear, with the day their town lost its innocence. New residents knew nothing of the case. Old-timers still locked doors that once stood open. Sarah Chen, forcibly retired but unable to truly leave, attended every vigil. The case had cost her marriage, strained her relationship with her children, carved lines in her face that makeup couldn't hide. She'd solved 37 other cases over her career, but they blurred together. Rebecca remained singular, the one that got away. The cold case unit filed Rebecca under suspended pending new evidence. A euphemism for given up. Her boxes migrated to long-term storage, then to a basement archive that flooded in 2019. Some evidence was damaged, some was lost. Each degradation another small death. At the vigil's end, Martha Holbrook would speak. Same words every year. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. My daughter is out there, and I will never stop looking. Her voice, once strong, now whispered against winter wind. But whispers, Chen knew, could still carry truth. 20 winters, 7,300 days, each one a small eternity of not knowing. The kind of pain that doesn't sharpen or dull but simply exists, constant as breath, reliable as sorrow. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Candlelight, answers waited. They had to, because 20 years of questions had to mean something, had to lead somewhere. Technology evolves. Cold cases wait. Sometimes patience is rewarded in ways no one expects. January 2024 brought Detective Marcus Thompson to Traverse City. Fresh from solving a 15-year-old case in Detroit using advanced DNA phenotyping, Thompson approached cold cases like archaeological digs, carefully, methodically, with tools the original investigators never imagined. Sarah Chen, pulled from retirement as a consultant, watched him work with guarded hope. The breakthrough started small. Thompson ordered complete digitization of all evidence, including water-damaged materials from the 2019 flood. A forensic photographer named Amy Liu noticed something while enhancing the ATM footage, a reflection in a store window across the street. The man in the dark coat, his face visible for exactly 3 frames in the glass of Morrison's jewelry. Modern facial recognition software, light years beyond 2003's technology, began its work. Chen held her breath as algorithms analyzed bone structure, measured distances between features, compared against databases that didn't exist 20 years ago. The wait felt eternal. Then a match. Raymond Briggs, custodian at Munson Medical Center from 1998 to 2004. The name meant nothing to Chen initially. He'd been interviewed once briefly, lost among hundreds of hospital employees, but Thompson's eyes sharpened as he pulled the personnel file. Briggs had worked the night shift, would have known Rebecca's schedule, had access to employee parking, left Traverse City abruptly in March 2004, citing family emergency, no forwarding address, the kind of departure that seems reasonable unless you're looking for unreasonable things. Chen felt her pulse quicken as they dug deeper. Briggs had complaints in his file, nothing actionable, just makes female staff uncomfortable. One incident in 2002, found in the women's locker room, claimed he was fixing a leak. Rebecca Holbrook had filed that complaint. The DNA evidence, preserved but never matched, suddenly had new purpose. Thompson ran it through genealogical databases that had revolutionized cold case work. Partial matches led to family trees led to possibilities narrowed to one name that appeared again and again in the algorithmic calculations, Raymond Briggs. But knowing and proving were different animals. Briggs could be anywhere, could be dead, could have spent 20 years perfecting his invisibility. Thompson and Chen began the hunt, following digital breadcrumbs through decades of data, credit reports, employment records, traffic citations. Slowly a pattern emerged. The critical discovery came from Thompson's partner, Detective Janet Wu, who specialized in financial forensics. Briggs had been using his deceased brother's identity since 2004, living in plain sight in Petoskey, just 60 miles from Traverse City, working as a maintenance supervisor at a nursing home, the kind of job that required background checks he'd somehow passed. Chen stared at the driver's license photo Wu had found. 20 years older, hair gone gray, face settled into different lines, but the eyes, she knew those eyes, had seen them in blurry ATM footage 1,000 times, had felt them watching from the edges of the case, patient and cold. "We need to be careful," Thompson warned. "One mistake and he runs. We get one shot at this." Chen nodded, but inside something wild and fierce was building. 20 years of questions, 20 years of Martha Holbrook's tears, 20 years of Rebecca waiting to come home. One shot was all she needed. Surveillance began on February 1, 2024, Super Bowl Sunday, providing perfect cover for the undercover van parked outside Raymond Briggs' modest rental house. Detective Thompson orchestrated the operation with surgical precision. They needed DNA confirmation before arrest. 20 years of circumstantial evidence wouldn't survive court without it. Briggs, living as Robert Hillman, maintained routines that spoke of long practice at being invisible: work, home, grocery store on Thursdays, church on Sundays, where he sang in the choir and helped with coffee hour. The horror of banality, evil serving donuts to parishioners. Chen watched from the mobile command unit, studying this man who'd haunted her for 2 decades. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone perpetually aware of cameras, of watching eyes. Never jaywalked, never speeded, paid cash whenever possible, the habits of a man with secrets buried deep as Michigan snow. Week 2 brought opportunity. Briggs visited a walk-in clinic for bronchitis. The discarded tissue in the parking lot became evidence. The coffee cup thrown in a public trash can, each item carefully collected, documented, rushed to the state lab where technicians worked with the reverence of people handling holy relics. February 14, Valentine's Day. Chen's phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Thompson's voice carefully controlled. "It's a match." Briggs' DNA on Rebecca's scarf. The scarf found in her car, the one detail never released to the public. Chen sat in her dark kitchen, 20 years of exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. They had him. The arrest required delicacy. Briggs worked with vulnerable populations. Panic could mean tragedy. They decided on a traffic stop, controllable, quick, away from potential victims. Thompson's team positioned themselves along Briggs' route home, waiting for him to commit any minor infraction. Even that took 3 days. The man drove like someone expecting to be stopped. February 17, 4:34 p.m. Briggs failed to signal a lane change. Lights flashed. He pulled over slowly, hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer Patricia Dunn, who'd responded to the original scene 20 years ago, approached the vehicle. Poetic justice in uniform. "License and registration, please." They watched him calculate, weighing options. Run, fight, comply. In the end he simply nodded, movements mechanical, as Dunn ran his false documents, knowing exactly what she'd find. Backup units sealed every escape route. Thompson and Chen waited 1 block away, listening to radio chatter, feeling time slow to honey. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle." The moment stretched taut. Briggs emerged, standing in winter light that made him look older, grayer, more ordinary than any monster had a right to look. They arrested him for identity theft first, a clean, provable charge that would hold him while they built the murder case. As handcuffs clicked closed, Briggs looked directly at Chen through the surveillance camera. A moment of recognition, perhaps, or just the blank stare of someone watching 20 years of careful construction collapse. He said nothing during transport, nothing during booking. The silence felt familiar, another void where answers should be. But Chen had learned patience from Rebecca's case. The net was closed, the fish was caught. Now came the careful work of ensuring he could never swim free again. The interrogation room at Traverse City Police Department hadn't been updated since the 1990s. Beige walls, humming fluorescent lights, the kind of space designed to be forgotten. Raymond Briggs sat across from Detective Thompson and Chen, looking smaller than his 5'10" frame suggested. 63 years old, wearing a jail-issued orange jumpsuit that made his skin look gray. His attorney, a public defender named Melissa Hart, sat beside him taking notes on a yellow legal pad. For 6 hours Briggs maintained innocence. Thompson methodically presented evidence, DNA, facial recognition, timeline reconstructions. Briggs answered in monosyllables, eyes fixed on a water stain on the ceiling. Chen watched for tells, for cracks in the facade, found only the practiced calm of someone who'd been rehearsing this moment for 20 years. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Thompson placed a photo on the table, not of Rebecca, but of Briggs' mother. She passed in 2021, Thompson said quietly. Never knew what you did. That must have been hard, keeping it from her. Something shifted in Briggs' face, a micro-expression of pain, quickly suppressed. Hart leaned over, whispering urgently. Briggs shook his head. She was supposed to work late that day, he said suddenly. His voice, unused for hours, came out raspy. Rebecca, she was covering a double shift. I'd checked the schedule. Thompson and Chen exchanged glances. After 20 years of silence, words were finally coming. Briggs talked for 3 hours. How he'd fantasized about Rebecca since her first day at the hospital. How he'd memorized her routines, collected small things she'd discarded, a hair tie, a pen, a coffee cup. The complaint she'd filed in 2002 had enraged him. Like I was nothing, less than nothing, just some creep. December 15, 2003. He'd called in sick, spent the morning working up courage, followed her from the hospital, watched her car trouble, saw opportunity in mechanical failure. He'd approached offering help, just Ray from maintenance, harmless, helpful. She'd been grateful, accepted a ride to the mechanic. I drove past the mechanic, Briggs said, voice flat as old paint. She started asking questions, getting nervous. I had the syringe ready, propofol from the hospital, quick, humane. He said the word like it mattered, like there was mercy in stolen consciousness. The abandoned car at Hickory Hills had been staging. He'd returned later with Rebecca unconscious, carried her into the woods he'd scouted weeks before. The footprints ending were simple. He'd carried her from that point, his own tracks later obscured by snowfall and search teams. Where is she? Chen's voice cracked, 20 years of professional composure finally breaking. Briggs drew a map on Hart's legal pad, coordinates memorized, burned into brain tissue by 2 decades of revisiting. 3 miles from where her car was found, in a grove of pines where snow never fully melted, where searchers had looked but not looked well enough. I went back sometimes, he admitted, to apologize, to make sure she was still hidden, peaceful. Chen left the room, needing air, needing distance from this man who spoke of murder like lawn maintenance. In the hallway, she called Martha Holbrook. We found her, she said, and then couldn't say more because Martha's sobs filled the silence between them, the kind of tears that are equal parts grief and relief, the sound of a mother whose waiting was finally over. When Chen returned, Briggs was signing his confession, each page another nail in his own coffin. He looked up at her once. I never meant for it to last this long, he said. The not knowing, I'm sorry for that. As if the duration was the crime. As if 20 years versus 20 minutes mattered to Rebecca Holbrook, who'd wanted only to go home, to have lunch with her mother, to live the life that was stolen in 47 minutes on a snowy Tuesday afternoon. Just as Chen thought, watching them lead Briggs away, was a cold comfort. But after 20 winters, even cold comfort was something. They found Rebecca Holbrook on February 20, 2024, exactly where Raymond Briggs had promised she would be. The recovery team worked with archaeological precision, treating the site like the sacred ground it had become. Snow fell softly, as it had that day 20 years ago, nature's strange symmetry. Martha Holbrook wasn't there, couldn't be there, but Sarah Chen stood witness, tears freezing on her cheeks as they finally brought Rebecca home. The funeral filled St. Francis beyond capacity, 20 years of waiting condensed into one morning of goodbye. Rebecca's colleagues from the hospital, aged now, grief-lined, came to honor the nurse who'd never stopped being part of their team. Tom Caldwell sat in the back, wedding ring catching light, crying for the life that might have been. Lisa Holbrook delivered the eulogy, her detective's composure breaking as she spoke of a sister who'd taught her to be brave, to be kind, to sing even when scared. Raymond Briggs pleaded guilty to avoid trial, accepting life without parole. Martha Holbrook attended every hearing, needing to see the face of the man who'd stolen her daughter. She never spoke to him, but her presence filled the courtroom, like judgment itself. When the sentence was read, she simply nodded and left, dignity intact despite decades of damage. Detective Chen finally dismantled her garage caseboard on a Sunday morning in March. Each photo, each report, each red string had served its purpose. David, her ex-husband, helped her carry boxes to the car. "You did it," he said quietly. "You never gave up on her." They stood in the empty garage, in the space obsession had filled for 20 years, and Chen felt something she hadn't expected, not satisfaction, not closure, but a quiet kind of peace. Traverse City began its own healing. The Hickory Hills Trail, reopened with a new name, Rebecca's Path, and a memorial bench where people left flowers. The town that had locked its doors began, slowly, to unlock them again. Trust once shattered, reassembled itself in careful increments. The case changed how Michigan handled missing persons. Rebecca's law mandated immediate DNA collection, improved interagency communication, and funding for cold case units. From tragedy, systems improved. Future Rebeccas might be found sooner, might be found alive. Martha Holbrook lived 3 more years, long enough to see her daughter properly buried, to visit a grave that finally held meaning. She died peacefully in her sleep. Rebecca's photo on her nightstand, that yellow mug still waiting by an empty chair. At her funeral, the minister spoke of reunions, of waiting ended, of mothers and daughters together again beyond winter's reach. Some mysteries, even when solved, leave scars that never fully heal. Traverse City still pauses on December 15th, remembering. Sarah Chen, retired fully now, sometimes drives past the hospital, the ATM, the trail, tracing the route that defined her career. She thinks of Rebecca Holbrook, forever 31, forever missing until she wasn't, forever a reminder that justice delayed is not always justice denied. In small towns across America, other families wait by phones that don't ring, setting places at tables for children who won't come home. Other detectives build caseboards in garages, chasing ghosts through decades of darkness. But sometimes, rarely miraculously, after 20 winters of questions, answers come. Sometimes, the lost are found. Sometimes, even in the deepest cold, there is a thought.